In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, because of your mercy and faithfulness. Why should the nations say, where is their God? Our God is in heaven, and does whatever he wills. The house of Israel trust in the Lord, who is their help and shield. The house of Aaron trust in the Lord, who is their help and shield. Those who fear the Lord trust in the Lord, who is their help and shield. The Lord remembers us and will bless us. Will bless the house of Israel, will bless the house of Aaron, will bless those who fear the Lord, small and great alike. May the Lord increase your number, yours and your descendants. May you be blessed by the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. The heavens belong to the Lord, but he has given the earth to the children of Adam. The dead do not praise the Lord, not all those who go down into silence. It is we who bless the Lord, both now and forever. Alleluia. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I like to pray with the Psalms. They say it all. We don't have to invent anything else than that. So we ended up with the fourth plague. We talk about those swarms of flies. And now chapter 9, death of Egyptian livestock. What is happening here? This plague is important because, again, as you see, the plagues are intensifying. They're getting a little more intense and more, you can say, violent in a way. So this plague, death of Egyptian livestock, is in a way punishment of all the gods of Egypt. Why? Because remember, you have to remember that the Egyptians, they worship their animals, because for them the animals were the, let's say, incarnation of their gods. So all of a sudden, gods are not able to protect their own images, their own incarnations. So this is a punishment on all the gods of Egypt. But the Lord, this is done. Verse 1, then the Lord said to Moses, going to the Pharaoh, said to him, and verse 3, the hand of the Lord will fall with a very severe plague upon your cattle, horses, donkeys, camels, and so on and so forth. But the Lord will make distinction between the cattle of Israel and those of Egypt, so that nothing shall die of all that belongs to the son of Israel. So here all of a sudden we have these Israelites that are being protected from this disease, from these plagues. Only the Egyptians will lose their animals, their cattle. And again, but the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let people go. So he gets more obstinate. He's like, I will not give up, whatever, no matter what. So the 6 plagues, again, it's going to be affecting people directly, affecting their bodies, the boils. So we hear the handful of ash. God says to Moses and Aaron, take handful of ashes from the kiln, and let Moses throw them towards the heaven in the sight of Pharaoh. And it shall become fine dust over all the land of Egypt, and become boils breaking out in sores on man and beast throughout all the land of Egypt. And verse 11, and the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened the heart of the Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them, as the Lord has spoken to Moses. So you see, that must be rather painful, because all of a sudden you're losing, first you get a little annoyance with water becoming blood and all the others, and gnats and flies and so on. Then you're losing your animals. All of a sudden, you have outbreak of boils on your body, and that's not really. So people get kind of thinking about, okay, what's going on in here, and then we have the 7th plague, which is thunder and hail. Mostly it's about hail, but here we see that God is being merciful. Why? Because what God is doing is telling Moses, tell the Egyptians to put their slaves and animals, whatever it's left, under the cover, so that they don't get killed. So whoever listened and hid the animals in the stalls and under cover, those animals survived. But who didn't, they lost the animals and their slaves and everybody else. So again, God, even in punishment, God is merciful. God does not want people to die unnecessarily. It's good to know that. So what happened at the end of the 7 plagues, again, number 7, so these are the 7 plagues, Pharaoh all of a sudden has little change of heart. Verse 27. Then Pharaoh sent and called Moses and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. Entreat the Lord, therefore there has been enough of this thunder and hail. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. Moses said to him, as soon as I have gone out of the city, I will stretch out my hands to the Lord, and the thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, that you may know that the earth is the Lord. So again, it's not the God of Egypt that rule the weather. It's God to whom Moses prays that he stops the plagues. But then, verse 30, but as for you and your servant, I know that you do not yet fear the Lord God. So basically he's telling Pharaoh, all you're saying right now is just empty words. You're just BSing me because I know you're not going to let us go. And Pharaoh does not let them go. No, the hail stopped. And Pharaoh said, no, you're not going. I'm not letting you go. So the 8th plague, locust. The beginning of that plague is interesting, though. Go into Pharaoh, God says to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his servant, that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your sons and your sons' sons how I have made sport of the Egyptians. Not the best translation, because in Hebrew would be more appropriate, would be I have made mockery of the Egyptians. So I will mock the Egyptians and their gods. And what signs I have done to them. So this whole idea again, that those plagues have educational purpose. They will be serving later on to teach the Israelites, to teach the Jewish people about how God is protecting them, how God works for them. So they went and they called the locust, and the locust comes out. And then verse 8, and then Moses and the locust destroyed whatever it destroys. And Moses went back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, go and serve the Lord your God. Again, be gone, be off to your worship. Again, this expression, be off to your worship. But who are you to go? And Moses said, we will go with our young and old. We will go with our sons and daughters, with our flocks and herds, for we must hold a feast to the Lord. And he said to them, the Lord be with you, if I ever let you and you little ones go. Look, you have some evil purpose in mind. Go, the men among you, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desire. So again, the children and women will stay as hostages. And Moses said, no, either we all go or we don't go. So he calls the locusts. And we see this whole chapter is just, again, I'm not going to go through those plagues. You read it, so just want to touch on a couple of things. So, but the hearts of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let children go. Now, verse 21, 9th plague. This plague is very important because, again, darkness, 3 days of darkness. Remember, the main god of Egypt is God Ra, which is represented by sun. So he has power. And Pharaoh, as I told you last time, Pharaoh every morning will perform this ritual that in this ritual, he will resurrect it, this Ra, the sun, so that, because, the Egyptians believe that night falls, at the end of the day, the night falls because the god Ra is being eaten by a demon. I don't remember his name right now. By a demon. So in the morning, the Pharaoh performed a ritual of resurrection of the God's son, so that the sun will come out. And the sun will be, again, this life-giving God Ra, who will rule over Egypt. Now, if you've ever been to Egypt during the summertime, or most of the year, actually winter time is not bad either, but most of the year, talking about, let's say, sun being there all the time. So Miami has more cloudy days, than Egypt. But that's why they worship God, Ra as God's son. And here we have God who is sending 3 days of darkness. So no matter what kind of rituals Pharaoh will perform, it will be dark. And the darkness is so thick that you can touch it with your hands. Now, have you ever been in a room that is that dark? You've been there once. There was, what was that? I think it was behavioral. When I was doing my mental health counseling degree, we did study on behavioral techniques and things like that. And one of them was, that people will go into a room that was totally dark. It's scary. There's nothing. You can see nothing. It's a total. It's so thick, almost darkness. It's real very. It's not comfortable because you're outside, and even if you don't see the stars and so on. After a while, your eyes get used to, and you can see things. There is this darkness that you cannot see anything, and it's a little disconcerting, put it that way. And here it lasts for 3 days. So again, Moses and God is exposing the impotence, the weakness, of the chief god of Egypt. But also, it's reference to Genesis 1, because what's happening at the beginning of the book of Genesis? There's darkness and chaos, and out of darkness and chaos, God brings light and order. So you see, God is creating here as well. God is creating the new nation, so it has to be darkness and chaos. What will be the chaos? When all the children will die, right? When all the firstborn will die in the 10 plagues. But after that, God is creating the new nation. So again, and we say, okay, go serve the Lord. Pharaoh calls Moses and says, go serve the Lord, but leave you animals behind. And Moses using the same argument, we don't know what we need to offer to God, so we need to bring our animals with us. So Pharaoh, verse 27 of chapter 10, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take heed to yourself. Never see my face again, for in the day you see my face, you shall die. Moses said, as you say, I will not see your face again. Now Moses is growing a little bold here. He kind of grows the cojones a little bit here, because before he was talking to Pharaoh, all of a sudden he said, okay, that's fine. I'm not gonna go talk to you. You threaten me, the threat will be on you. So he's kind of right now he's standing up for himself. It took him some time to stand up to Pharaoh, but finally he does. And then Lord said to Moses, chapter 11, there's one more plague, and he says, chapter 2, verse 2, speak now in the hearing of the people. Remember, for those 10 plagues, Moses did not talk to Jewish people. He only talked to Pharaoh and his courtiers and his advisors. Why? Because the Israelites, the Jews, were too scared. Remember, when he was going to see Pharaoh, to let go the people, the elders disappeared, never went with him, and then when there was extra work on them, they were complaining and they want to get rid of Moses. So this is the first time that he will speak to them. And he speaks to them about restitution first. Okay? So what is happening there? That they ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor jewelry of silver and of gold. And the Lord gave people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. So what's happening here? God is telling them, go to your neighbor and ask them for money, for gold, for anything else. Because you tell them that we need to go perform sacrifice in the desert, so we need to borrow some money. Remember, those people experienced just all those 9 plagues. So you said, okay, here is whatever you want, and just go. Just go and pray for us. Go and offer the sacrifice for us, so that we will not be affected by any more plagues, but by any more things. So Moses says, that says the Lord, about midnight I will go forth in the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits upon his throne, even to the firstborn of the maidservant who is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the cattle, and there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor ever shall be again. And again, but against the sons of Israel, nothing will happen. Now, the last plague, is a little problematic, because you can ask, why would God has to kill all those little children, all those firstborn? Well, remember, as sins for the punishment, the Egyptians killed all the male children of the Israelites. God is only killing the firstborn. So you see, that's the thing. So it's not, let's say, lex talionis. It's not, eye for an eye. Is, that has to affect the nation. Why? Because the Egyptians were, along with Pharaoh's orders, to kill the Israelites, the Jewish people, the Jewish children. That's why they will be punished for that. Okay. Do we like that? Probably not. According to our own, let's say, sensitivities of 21st century, we might not like it. But when you look at, sometimes we don't learn a lesson, or we don't change our ways unless something really happens to us, unless something really affects us. Very often, and it's not pretty usually. You do, let's say, I don't know what kind of sin we can talk about. For example, lying, right? You keep lying and keep lying. And you stop lying, telling lies when it comes out and you look foolish, or you lose someone because of the lies that you tell. and you lose someone's trust, right? Things like that. There's plenty of examples. You all have something in your life that you can probably say that unless we really get a kick in behind to wake us up, we won't change our ways. And that's what happened to Egyptians. But also has to be punishment for killing the children. So that's why I always said, we see that in our country, what is happening, right? Thanks be to God, Roe versus Wade was reversed and all that. But when you look what's happened for 50-something years, we're killing children, and we went along with that. Nobody really protested that from the beginning. Maybe later on, the Catholic Church was speaking and so on, but nobody really stood up strongly against that when it came into us law. So what happened? What's the punishment for that? For us killing how many, 60 million children or something like that? Or maybe more than that? That's what, okay, doing more. What's the punishment? We already see the punishment. Okay? If life doesn't matter, life doesn't matter. If you can kill innocent, and it doesn't matter that you kill innocent, meaning you will do that. The mass shooting. What's happening in mass shooting? What is the target of any mass shooting? 90% of targets are schools. If it's okay to kill innocent, it's okay to kill innocent. You see the punishment? We already bear the punishment for abortion. That's the punishment. Because if someone is growing up and he's being taught that it's okay to kill innocent children, innocent babies, hey, I'm going to take a gun and I'm going to kill more of them. Doesn't matter on which side of the womb they are, right? It's okay to kill the innocent. You see, that's how, let's say, so God is just God. So the society that does not value life is going to be punished for that by losing lives. Mm-hmm. Is God doing it? No, we do that to ourselves. God allows that to happen because, as we will see later on, God allows the sins of the fathers to affect their children and so on and so forth. So, yes.
No. Again, I understand what you're saying, but I have some issues with, for example, in the 7th plague, even in punishment, he was merciful because he told them, take cover, right? And I understand it's punishment for what the Egyptians did in killing the male children, but the Egyptians had free will, and they were, awful people, so they killed them. But here, God is doing it himself. He's killing the firstborn. Again,
okay, what's the problem here is God's justice. Okay, God is the ultimate judge. God is judging what will be the best punishment. We might not like it. You see, that's why, we don't like those mass shootings, right? Why God didn't stop them? Actually, there was anniversary yesterday. Was anniversary of Parkland shooting when I was there in 2018. And why God didn't stop that guy? Why God didn't stop? Well, because you have free will, and sometimes God allows that free will to be expressed in ways that are hurting innocent.
But in killing the firstborn.
But not every child.
Right.
But he did it with Noah also.
What
he did it with Noah.
There, it wasn't somebody's free will. That was God directly doing it, as opposed to somebody doing it through free will.
Why God did that directly? Because, again, remember, the only violence that is happening in Book of Exodus so far is done by God. God is telling it's again education. It's a lesson for the Jews. I'm fighting for you. I do things for you. It's not you doing. I'm the one who delivers you. And I deliver you through my justice, by being just and punishing injustice. We might not like it, I understand. But again, God was merciful, because God kills only the firstborn, not all the boys.
Talk to the firstborn, he has a different opinion.
It's mercy. We might, again...
For the secondborn.
It's always better to be the second one. That's the case.
They're a natural disaster.
Yeah, but remember what's happening with the first. Why firstborn was so important? Because remember, in most of the cultures, even up to now, the firstborn, especially in the Middle East, the firstborn is the one who inherits everything, which means they were the ones who will take over society, because they will be the one possessing everything and so on. By killing the firstborn, again, God is telling, I'm in charge, not the Pharaoh, not the gods of Egypt. Because again, Pharaoh was this divine presence, and his child is, according to Jewish tradition, his child was the first one to die, his firstborn. So because of what he did to people of Israel. Okay, so it's there's a kind of justice again. Sometimes we might not like what God does, what God allows to happen, but who are we to judge the Most High, right? He does whatever he wills. But again, there is a justice in that. Yes, you can raise objections once you see him face to face.
I did not get a chance.
But I think. But I don't think you will have any objection then. Okay. No, but see, I understand that problem because it is a little. You don't feel comfortable talking about this thing. God killing someone, God killing those innocent, well, not innocent children, firstborn. We don't know if they were little or big, whatever it is. But we don't like that notion of God being just and punishing people. Well, guess what? There will be judgment, there will be punishment. Now, all of us will face it. So pray that God will be merciful. Okay, so what's happening here? Now God is instituting the Passover. So it's very important, Passover. Why? Because Passover is something that the Jewish people celebrate up till today. And they celebrate it exactly the way it's described in Exodus. So let's look at that. Chapter 12. This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. And again, the Passover is the beginning of a liturgical year of the Jewish people. Because New Year for Jews is Yom Kippur, so it's not the same, but this is liturgical year. So the Passover begins the liturgical year of the Jewish calendar. So tell all the congregation of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, they shall take every man a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, then a man, his neighbor next to his house, shall take according to the numbers of person, according to what each can eat, you count for the lamb. So what's happening? It's an animal who is 1 year old, without blemish, a lamb or a goat, and it has to be killed and it has to be eaten that evening. Why? Well, because it's a communal celebration. Usually the lamb for Passover was killed on the threshold of the house. The blood was being gathered into like a little basin, and then the father of the house will take a branch of hyssop and will smear that blood of the lintels of the house. So what that signifies? That there is life in the house, there is death outside. That's what Passover is. The life inside, death outside. That's what that blood means. Why? Because the blood is spilled, which means life is being poured out, spilled. And why not leftovers? Because again, God wants people, first of all, and I'm sorry for those of you who are vegetarian, God does not like vegetarians. Everybody has to eat meat on Passover. That's it. And it has to be roasted. Why roasted? The blood, yes, because when you grill, when you roast the meat, whatever leftover blood is there, it goes, it's being grilled out. Okay, so that's what's important here. And then also it's celebration of a community, because usually a year-old lamb you can feed between we're talking about like 30 pounds of meat, maybe 20 something. It's a good sized animal. So you're never gonna eat it in one family, unless it's a Cuban family. Then you're gonna. All right. So what you do, you have to invite your neighbors. And the rabbis will say that usually one lamb will feed between 15 to 30 people, because they have to eat everything. They cannot break its bones, so they cannot eat the marrow. So it has to be enough for them to eat and be filled without engorging on it, without overeating. But there is no leftovers for next day. So it has to be community celebration. See, that's why the Jews say, all the Jewish feasts that they celebrate, the rabbis will say, are very simply described. They tried to kill us, they failed, let's eat. So that's what's happened here. But you cannot keep that lamb till the 14th day. So you keep that lamb in the house and take care of it for 4 days. Delayed gratification. Remember, that time, Middle East, everywhere in the world, meat wasn't really that common on the table. Why? Because it takes forever to raise an animal, and it's expensive. So that's why you go to the temple and you offer the animal in the temples when the priest slaughters the animal, takes part for himself, burns the inside, the entrails, and then give you the rest so that you can eat with your family. Okay, that's the purpose of the temple sacrifices. There was very little butchering outside of ritual butchering, temple butchering, in the whole Middle East and even in Europe, because Romans did the same thing. So the meat wasn't that common. If you're rich, you could afford probably every day. But normal people will eat that meat only like Jewish people 4 times a year, when God ordered them to eat meat. Why? Hey, because we have to celebrate. So let's eat meat because that's a celebration. Because now we're not going to have meat for 2 or 3 months. We'll just be living on veggies. So let's eat meat. Okay? So that's how important it is. And it has to be not by yourself, that you leave little leftovers for tomorrow. Everybody has to eat, and it has to be eaten, the entire thing. So it's, again, building community. It's not just family. It has to be more people, enough so that there is no leftovers. So we see then verse 7, then you shall take some of the blood and put it onto doorposts and so on, and they shall eat the flesh that night, again, roasted with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat it. Usually what were the bitter herbs? Actually, you will laugh, but lettuce. They consider lettuce as bitter herb because they will eat it raw with meat. So nowadays they eat horseradish dipped in honey. Again, bitter herb and sweetness of freedom. That's what is nowadays what they eat. And matzah, unleavened bread, which is again is not a feast. You eat it because you have to. You don't enjoy matzah. Well, you might, but it's hard on your teeth and chewing that for 7 days, because after that they have to eat that matzah, unleavened bread, for 7 days. So it's not.
I think you once said why unleavened bread, but I can't for the life of me remember right now.
Well, because it has to be something that is. Remember, Egyptians. The historians will tell you that Egyptians invented the leavened bread, because the first time the bread was baked, leavened bread, was in Egypt, probably like 4,000 years before BC and so on. But the Egyptians, it was the first place that they, let's say, invented the leavened bread. So this is against the Egyptians. We're not gonna eat what the Egyptians do. We're gonna do leavened bread, and also it has to be very simple: just wheat and water, flour and water, nothing else. Why? Because it's the bread of the slaves. Very simple bread of slaves. Okay? Yes.
Didn't they have to, they had to leave quickly, so they couldn't let it rise?
That's another explanation, yes. But the main thing is, it's a food of the poor, food of the slaves. It's, again, apologia against Egyptian customs, because, if you go and have a nice piece of Cuban bread with a little olive oil or butter and things like that, it's a feast. Try to eat matzah like that. No, you can't. You can't scoop that oil with your matzah, or put bread on the matzah, because it doesn't work like that. So it's food of the poor and slaves. But also they were in haste, so they didn't have time to wait for those couple of days for bread to rise. That's for sure. Again, this is Bible, so it's not either or; it's both and always. There's always at least 3 explanations to everything. So bitter herbs, and then roasted with its legs and inner parts. And then we go, it is the verse 11. In this manner shall you eat it. Your loins girded, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. So we have to be ready to go, ready for the journey. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, It is the Lord's Passover. What is interesting about the word Passover, Pesach, you can translate it in three ways. One will be to pass over, which is again Passover. The Pesach came to English with that. The other translation of word Pesach, it would be to have compassion. And the last one probably is to protect. All three translations are valid. It depends on the context of the sentence, in the sentence. So which one of those meanings is here? All of the above. God protects the Israelites. God has compassion on them, saves their lives, and God passes over Israel's Jewish houses and kills the Egyptians and so on. So people will be spared. And then verse 12, and I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. So you see, it's very clear. No gods can protect those Egyptians. Again, judgment. I am the Lord. I am the one who is in charge, and I will show those Egyptians and God the Egyptians. I will pass judgment on them, so that even the Egyptians will know. But first of all, the Jewish people will know that there is only one God, that is their God, and He has power again, not just over the tribe of Israel, but everywhere. Okay. The blood shall be a sign for you. It's funny because the blood shall be a sign for you upon the house where you are. It's not a sign for the angel of death to pass over. It's a sign for the Jews. Why? Because they know again, there's life inside, death outside. So the blood it's a sign for the Jewish people that life is inside, in the community, in the family. Outside is death. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, I will pass over you, I will protect you, I will have compassion over you, and no plague shall fall upon you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. And now, verse 14. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall observe it as an ordinance forever. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, and on the first day, and so on and so forth. The very important word, memorial. What's happened when the Jews celebrate Passover? They don't just remember what happened 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. They are participating in that event. That's memorial. Meaning they go from chronos time into kairos time. Remember, we talked about that before. We have chronos, which is the chronological times, the hours and months and so on. And you have kairos time, which is God's time, the time of the quality of time. So that's what we do when we celebrate the Eucharist. We celebrate the memorial of Christ's death and resurrection. What it means that every time we go and celebrate the Eucharist, we are on Golgotha. We are in the upper room. We are in the sepulchre, Holy Sepulchre. So you can imagine now when we celebrated Mass there, in Holy Sepulchre during the pilgrimage, we were inside the Holy Sepulchre celebrating Mass. So for me as a priest, that was probably the most powerful experience of my life as priest, because that's what I do every day in the church. I celebrate. I'm standing at the tomb of Jesus, and there I was there celebrating right there. So this is the memorial. Takes us out of chronological time into chronos time. Meaning we are participating, we are standing on the Golgotha when Christ is dying, and we are there when He rises from the dead. That's memorial. So every time you hear the word memorial in the liturgical sense, it's always this idea of not just remembering something that happens 2,000 years ago, but actually being there. Okay? I hope that will help you to understand the Eucharist a little better. But that all comes from Jewish celebration of Passover. Of Passover Seder, because that's our Eucharist, that's what it is, Passover Seder. And that's what brings us in. Every time we remember, that's why you have this, after the consecration, what we say, the mystery of faith. We remember how you loved us, or things like that, right? We remember. We ask God to remember us. Remember that from earlier, what it means when we ask God to remember us. We want God to jump into action. That's what remember is. When I said, remember, Lord, those who have died, okay, God take care of them. Remember us, Lord, as we pray, God take care of us. But also when we remember, we're there. Okay? We are the Golgotha. That's memorial. That's our memorial. So see, you get little catechism, little teaching on the Eucharist as well. But that's what it is. That's where we get it from. So then we go, okay, verse 21, Moses is talking to the elders. He tells them what to go, and so on and so forth. And then verse 26, back to Passover, to the celebration today. And when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? You shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover. For he passed over the houses of the sons of Israel in Egypt when he slew the Egyptians, but spared our houses. And the people bowed their heads and worshiped. Again, the gesture of thanksgiving. So what is here? How the Passover Seder begins? Well, the eldest child is being asked, what do you mean by this service? Why do we do that? See, this is from Exodus. They do it exactly. There's 3 questions. We'll see that later on as well. But that's the whole celebration. It's to recall, to remind, to celebrate what they're part of, not just remember things that happened in the past. And it's also a celebration of Thanksgiving. Then the 10th plague, it starts, verse 29, at midnight. Kind of it's interesting because the Jewish day begins at sunset. So midnight, it will be like well into the day already. Why it's midnight? Just midnight, because everybody's in the house. It's dark, nobody wanders out. Remember, there's no electricity out there. At night, you don't wander around because there is no lights outside. So you stay at home. At midnight, you're probably well asleep because if sunset is at, let's say, 6 or 7, you eat dinner by 8 you're done. So by midnight, you're well asleep. So everybody's asleep. Everybody's in the house. And Lord struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. And then verse 30. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt. Again, the punishment for killing the children. Nobody heard the crying of the slaves. Now everybody is crying. For there was no house where one was not dead. And Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron by night. Yeah? First he threatened him, you're not going to see my face again because you're going to die. All of a sudden, come in, I have something to tell you. And he tells, rise up, go forth from among my people, both you and the sons of Israel, and go. And again, this translation, be off now to you worship. Not just go serve the Lord, but be off. Get out to you worship. So finally he changed his mind. Take you flocks and you herds, and as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. Pray for me. Pray for me. So all of a sudden, when he was touched personally, when he was faced with his own impotence, put it that way, because he could do nothing. Again, Pharaoh is divine. He is the God, the incarnation of God Ra, the main God of Egypt. So he's divine. They worship him. So he thinks he is divine. He thinks he has power of God. And all of a sudden, he's humiliated. And he finally gets it. So he says, go and pray for me. Doesn't last too long. Well, that's our human nature. We get punished, but then our remorse doesn't last too long if we are not humble enough. We just go and do whatever we do, right? We've seen that in our own lives. So what's happening there? Verse 33. And the Egyptians were urgent with the people to send them off to the land in haste, for they said, we are all dead men. So the Egyptians are, again, it's a fear all of a sudden. So the people took their dough before it was leavened. Here we go, they're in haste. So they take that dough that is being set up and they go. And the sons of Israel had also done as Moses told them, for they have asked Egyptian jewelry of silver and gold and clothing, and the Lord has given them favor. Thus they spoiled the Egyptians. So now you understand why this in California they want to introduce the law for reparation and all that. Because they say those people deserve those reparations. Yeah, the only problem is people who are living there right now, they're not very few of them are descendants of people who owned slaves. Again, is this again? Let's look at that, because I think that's important to look at it, because does black community here deserves reparations to some extent? Well, there is something that, again, you see, you can take slaves out of slavery, but it's difficult to take the slavery out of slaves. And there is this mentality in black communities that they have, that they are not good enough. Especially last 50, 60 years. 1950s weren't that bad, but then, the Jim Crow and everything else. So what's happened? There is always this bias towards black community, that they're not good enough. Okay? It is. I've seen it. You've probably seen it as well. The problem is they do perpetuate that. Because again, it's like those Israelites. What they will do, if one goes up, climbs up, and gets better, he forgets about his community. Mostly, there's very few that remember the community, try to do something for the community, and as they go up, they try to pull him down, right? Because there's jealousy. So there's this slave mentality still very much alive. Mm-hmm. So what needs to be done is to be education. Mm-hmm. Needs to be, again, equal opportunity. Not opportunity of outcome, equal opportunity to start when you start. That's very difficult to change. That's why you see society is in a way it is, because there was really nothing done after the Civil War to emancipate those people, to educate them, to raise them up. They always were treated as second-class citizens. Because segregation was still, in the 1950s, right? 60s and so on. So you see, officially they were not slaves, but they could not mix with the other folks, right? Now, those of you who are Cubans, how often you hear that? Especially, maybe not now, but let's say 20 years ago, right? 30 years ago. The word Polak, right? It's very. Yeah. It's always the same. You see, foreigners, strangers, people who look differently, and so on. They will be always something. So, the obligation of the society is what? To take care of those things. So to give people opportunity of equal, let's say, chance to start. And again, you parents yourself, you're first or second generation here, you get that opportunity, right? Doesn't work for black community for some reason, unfortunately. That's why we're still paying, because those crime-infested towns and drugs problem and everything else, it's a result of our racism, put it that way. We cannot put it otherwise, because if there's few races in society and society doesn't do anything.
Politics.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, why do you use racism right now? That's the main word to accuse someone of not being a good person, right? Yeah. The first thing that they throw at you is racist. Well, it has nothing to do with race right now, maybe. But the whole idea is, as a society, we need to be very careful and very, I'd say, also active in our faith. We need to make sure that at least we do justice to the people. You don't judge people by the way they look like, what skin color they have. See, that's the thing. Let's take a break. There was a question concerning this blood on the lentils. Is that a foreshadowing of blood of Christ? Let's say, to some extent, probably yes. Not for Jewish people, but for us, that's what it is. The blood that protects us, right? That could be the foreshadowing. And the fathers of the church and theologians will use that image of blood of the lamb that was being smeared on the doorpost as blood of protection, but also blood of mercy, because that's how God has mercy, by spilling out his own blood. So that's one of the possible Christian explanation of that. So verse 37 of chapter 12. So we have, and the sons of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot, about 600,000 men on foot, beside the women and children, and a mixed multitude also went up with them, and very many cattle, both flocks and herds. Again, freedom for Israelites, for the Jewish people meant everybody else is tagging along. So all the other slaves, all the other people that could get out, they joined the Jewish people. And we see that later on that will be a problem for the Israelites. So what is happening here? The number. We talked about that before. Where again, 600,000 men plus women and children. We're talking about more or less 2 million people. Okay, plus the band of marauders that are with them. So over 2 million people. Highly unlikely, put it that way. Why? Because the population of Egypt at that time was around 4 million. So could they have 2 million slaves? They could have, but again, the number. What is important about this number? Remember how many Jewish people, how big was the family of Jacob when they went to Egypt? 70. So God blessed them, but they multiplied. So all of a sudden it's over 600,000 people, men. So 70 men, over 600,000. So that's a blessing of God, that they multiplied, that they, despite of slavery, of persecution, that there were so many of them. Okay, strength in numbers. So what is happening there? Verse 40, the time that the sons of Israel dwelt in Egypt was 430 years. And at the end of 430 years, on that very day, all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. It was night of watching by the Lord to bring them out of the land of Egypt. So this same night is a night of watching kept to the Lord by all the sons of Israel throughout their generations. 430 years. Why is that number important? Because when you look on the number of years from the time when Abraham left the Ur of Chaldeans to the day where Jacob and his family came into Egypt, it was 430 years. So the Israelites were outside of Egypt as a family for 430 years and in Egypt for 430 years. Exactly the same amount of time. So that's the meaning of the number. Was it exactly 430 years? Maybe. Who cares? It's a nice number, and good to know that the same time passes from Abraham leaving his homeland into journey that God has sent him on, to people of Israel leaving house of slavery to set up on the journey that God sets them on to build the new nations. Okay, so this is the connection here to Abraham and to Jewish people at the time of Moses. So then we have, this is the ordinance of the Passover. So this, let's look at that again. No foreigner shall eat of it, but every slave that is bought for money may eat it after you have circumcised him. No sojourner or hired servant may eat it. In one house shall it be eaten. You shall not carry forth any of the flesh outside of the house, and you shall not break a bone of it. See, again, you have to stay in the house. That's why you have to invite people so that make sure that everything is eaten. You don't break the bones because you don't have to, you just have to eat so that you're full. You don't have to engorge on it. But you cannot take it, where we have leftovers, we're going to take it to our neighbors. No. You have to have enough people in the house to celebrate, to eat the whole thing. See, this whole, let's say, connection and care of the community. That community has to care for each other. That's what's so important. And when the stranger who sojourned with you and would keep the Passover of the Lord, let all his males be circumcised, that he may come near and keep it. He shall be as native in the land, but no uncircumcised person shall eat of it. There shall be one law for the native and for the stranger who sojourn among you. This is a great thing. There should be one law for the native and for the stranger. It's kind of funny. Over 3,000 years ago, more than that, you have this idea that everybody is equal under the rule of law. Now, something that we have problems with today. Right? Well, if you have enough money, you belong to the right party, they're not going to punish you. You get away with the murder, and things like that. So there is not equality under the law. If you have wrong skin color, they will be treated differently in the court than other people. So this is the whole idea that the Israelites were fighting for at that time. Everybody is equal under the law. Okay, so you have to imagine how much, let's say, you would think that we learn something from it, that our society will be better. There's something in human nature that we always have preferences, and we never really exercise justice. That's why the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, are very strong on be just, treat people rightly, protect the stranger, protect the widow, protect the weak one. Make sure that you do that so that you can have life. Again, the Torah is telling us you will be truly alive when you take care of someone else who needs that. That will be truly exercise of life. That will be truly, you will be truly alive there. So, and here we have also this whole idea about circumcision. We'll hear that about all the time. Why? Because circumcision for males is a visible reminder of the covenant. While males have to be circumcised, not females. Well, very simple. Women don't forget things. Right? You remember what your husband said 40 years ago, what he did. You remember everything. Men forget things. So it's a physical reminder for men. Hey, it's a vague generalization, but it works 99% of the time. Women don't forget anything, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe things that you want to forget, then you forget. If you want to remember something, you don't forget that. Men, they're clueless. So that's why every time Jewish man goes to the bathroom, he looks down and he remembers covenant. That's the purpose of circumcision. As simple as it is. Every time, because men needs to be reminded all the time. So that's why they circumcised. Now, the Jews don't practice female circumcision. That's the Arabs. That's a mutilation. The male, they do circumcise. Why? Common sense. Because men don't remember things. They need to be reminded over and over again. How many times have you to tell your husband to do something that you ask him to do 10 times before, right? And he still don't remember it. As simple as it is. Hey, I'm a man. I know what I'm talking about. Okay? Although I'm in the good way because I don't have anybody to remind me about those things that I don't know. Okay, so that's what it is. And that says, verse 50, thus did all the sons of Israel as the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, so they did. And on that very day, the Lord brought the sons of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. And the Lord said to Moses, consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever is the first to open the womb among the sons of Israel, both of man and beast, is mine. Why? Because God is the author of life. It's God who gives children. And why the firstborn has to be sacrificed? Again, we see that later on verse 11 to 16, that there is this tradition in Jewish faith that they redeem their firstborn. Because what is happening? Since they were sacred to the Lord, before the Levites, the firstborn was always the one who will have to serve in the temple, who will want to be performing the priestly duties. So what's happening? All of a sudden God says, no, we're going to have Levites taking care of it, but your sons have to be redeemed. And your animals, the firstborn animals, have to be redeemed. So today they pay $2 silver to the priest, to the Kohen, to the Kohanim. At that time, they started talking about 2 shekels or 3 shekels, whatever it was, the weight of silver. So again, every single firstborn has to be redeemed again, because those Levites, those priests, they perform the duty of the firstborn, so they need to be repaid for that, put it that way. That's a sacrifice to the Lord. That's why, we support our priests to some extent. Why, right? Why? Well, because I'm not a priest. I represent God. I, again, sacrifice my life in a way. It's not much of a sacrifice, a little bit. But in the sake to serve the community, but also instead of each and every one of the head of the house will have to perform sacrifice, or you have to take tour in the celebrating Eucharist or celebrating sacrifice. It's a priest that is designated to do that for the community. Okay, so I'm standing in for each and every one of you, head of the household, put it that way. That's the Jewish tradition, okay? And then Moses says to the people, remember this day in which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then he goes, 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. And verse 8, and you shall tell that you son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. You see, they're talking about Chronos. When the Jewish people celebrated the Passover, it's not what God did to their forefathers, but what God does for them at that day. So every time we celebrate the Eucharist, we said, this is what God has done for me, died on the cross for me, right? And it shall be to you as a sign on your hands, verse 9, and a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth, for with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. You shall therefore keep this ordinance at its appointed time from year to year. So what is happening here? Every Orthodox Jewish male, when they pray in the morning prayer, they put so-called tefillin. So you have one which is on the foreheads, little bags that they tie on the foreheads, which contains the Shema Israel, the handwritten part of a scroll with part of from passage from Deuteronomy, and on the left hand. Why? Because in the Deuteronomy, God is telling us, keep my law in your mind and on your heart. On your mind, left hand on your heart, close to your heart. See, that's why they put it when they pray. There's a reason for that. Okay. And then again, this consecration of the first males. And then why again, this whole idea about remembering Passover and remembering a memorial. You see, what is happening there, it's about freedom and redemption, what God has done for us. Why? Because we as people, we are not grateful. That's why we need to be taught how to be grateful. If you have children, how many times you have to say to your child, please say thank you? Does not come naturally. They have to learn that. We as humans have the same. That's why we celebrate Thanksgiving when we come to celebrate the Eucharist. It's a Thanksgiving. We say thank you to the Lord. Why? Because we need to be reminded about that. So we need to remember what God done for us. Again, for the Jewish people, it's redemption and it's freedom. In a way, because with freedom is, remember it or you're going to lose it. That sounds familiar? If you don't remember what freedom is about, you're going to lose it. Last few years kind of teach us about that very clearly. So it's nothing new. It happened over 3,000 years ago. It's happening now. That's our human nature. See, that's why God is trying to educate us. God is trying to teach us. It's always saying, listen, teach your children, say to your children. See, this is the role of the parents. It's not just school and teachers. Like for the Jews, it's the parents has to teach the children their faith. They are the first teachers. They have to teach children about freedom. They have to teach them about what God did for them. That's the role of parents. See, that's why it's tough, because nobody sends you to parenting school and you do it all by mistake, by trial and error, right? Sometimes it works well. Sometimes your kids do whatever they do. Right? Okay, verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near, for God said, lest the people repent when they see war and return to Egypt. So God knows his people, so he does not lead them along the Mediterranean, which will be only probably like 7 days walk. Okay, it will be only like 7 days when they go along the Mediterranean Sea. God leads them the opposite direction, towards the desert. Why? Because God knows they need time to get out of the slaves mentality. Okay? Why? Because they had good life in Egypt. Even if they were slaves, they have good life, and they will remember that. So all of a sudden, the choice of being taken care of or being free. Story as old as the world, and we still deal with that. Amen. So God led the people round by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the sons of Israel went up of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. So they have some arms. And then, verse 19, and Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph has solemnly sworn the sons of Israel, saying, God will visit you, then you must carry my bones with you from here. And then they move on, and they will proceed by pillar of fire and pillar of cloud by day, pillar of fire by night. It was pillar of cloud and pillar of fire. That's Shekinah, that's God's presence. God is guiding, God is leading his people. We'll see that over and over again. That's why on Easter Vigil, when we bless the water in the baptismal font and candle, the Paschal candle, what we talk about, like the pillar of fire led people to the wilderness. So this is the light of Christ that guides us through our darkness. See, that's the symbol there. So cloud, and the pillar of cloud is also every time Moses will talk with God in the tent of covenant on Sinai, the cloud will descend. Why? Because God does not want people to see his face and die. That's why it's always a cloud. It's clouded. Okay? So then the Lord said to Moses, tell the son of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pharaoh between Migdol and the sea. In front of Baal-Zepon, you shall camp over it. For Pharaoh will pursue you, and so on. And when the king of Egypt was told that the people has fled, the mind of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people, and they said, what is this we have done that we have let Israel go from serving us? You see, he didn't learn much. He was, let's say, sorry for a couple of hours and then got angry again. That's the story of human life, right? And he took 600 picket chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt and officers with them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the son of Israel as they went forth defiantly. So the Israelites are pretty much high on themselves. You know, they left Egypt. They took a lot of money, a lot of goods from the Egyptians. They have arms and they are on fire. But what is happening, verse 10? When Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they were in great fear. So from defiance to fear takes only like a couple of seconds, right? That's what it is. And they don't know any better. Remember, they are slaves. They think like slaves. And what's happened then? And the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, it is because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? There are no graves in Egypt, right? Those of you who were in Egypt, especially on the longer trip, if you see most of the country, what you see in Egypt mostly, the tombs. Pyramids, those are the tombs, the graves. Okay? So they basically, this kind of irony, they said, we would rather die, and because there's plenty of place to bury us over there in Egypt, than be free here in running from the Egyptians. It is not what you say to us in Egypt, let us alone and let us serve the Egyptian. Because they say, we would rather be slaves and alive than free and dead. It's kind of funny how it repeats itself over and over again, right? So was it that American Revolution, right? Was it, don't tread on me, better give me freedom or death? It's a whole different, again, approach of a free man as opposed to slave. Now, people who appreciate their freedom, they would not surrender to slavery. But if you don't know any better, well, so what's happening then? For it would have better to die, and Moses said to the people, fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be still. Look at that. When we go through difficult times, when we go through times that kind of scares us, what is the best? Again, what is Moses telling us? What is in our lives? Fear not, stand firm, which means trust, and see the salvation. God will take care of us. God will fight for us. All we have to do is just allow God that to happen. In our own spiritual life battle, sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes you are so scared that you want to run away, that you want to give up. What is the Bible telling us? Do not fear, trust. Okay. Actually, that was, how many times that phrase, do not be afraid or fear not, appears in the Bible? Little trivia. 365 times.
Almost.
One for each day. Kind of interesting. You can Google that, because that was one of the at St. Newman we had a Bible class, and it's one of the ladies there found it. But that's I checked that. That's 365 days God is telling His people, do not be afraid. So for each day God is telling us, do not be afraid. Again, look at last 2 years. What happened? We give in to fear, and how many lives were destroyed and still are destroyed because we did not trust, we did not believe. It's different between being careless and being afraid. I always said with this pandemic, what's happening? We just got scared and everything was blown out of proportion. Well, all we needed to do is to be careful. So that's the thing. So yeah, it's good to think about that because we do the same thing in our lives. Every time we get scared, we do stupid thing. Only when we trust God and we said, okay, I refuse to be guided by fear. I refuse to be afraid. Only then we can do something. Only then we have power over our weakness, our fear. So that's why, when you're afraid, refuse to give in to that fear. Because only then you can make decisions that will be wise and guided by trust and by faith. Okay? Doesn't mean that you're stupid. It's just that you refuse to be, let's say, enslaved by fear. And many people, again, you see people still driving in their masks, right? In a car by themselves.
Walking outside with a mask.
Yeah. And other things that happen. But you see, the thing is, I'm sorry for them. Because imagine how afraid they are, how scared they are that they still do that. And that's not normal. There's a problem there. So don't do that to yourself. Not just with pandemic, but in general. Don't. Then the Lord, verse 15. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. Lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the sons of Israel may go dry ground through the sea." Now, which part of the sea? What kind of sea did they cross? Did they cross the Red Sea, or what they call in Hebrew Yam Suf, which is Sea of Reeds? Remember, they are up north in the delta. Suez Canal does not exist yet. What is the part of Suez Canal are marshes, Everglades, put it that way, almost like Everglades. That's what the whole part. Red Sea is much farther to the south. So what they are crossing, they're crossing Everglades. Okay? So God is sending a wind that kind of gets that water because you have only 2 feet of water, maybe in some places a little more than that. But most of the swamps are maybe 2-3 feet of water. It's not the Red Sea as such, so it's Sea of Reeds in Hebrew. Okay? So it's a swamp. Again, they have to walk through it. It's not easy task to walk through the swampy ground. It's tough, but God dries the land for them. And also, God divides it again. God makes sure that they go on with dry food. But it's not the Red Sea that they're crossing. It's a Sea of Reeds. So what's happening there? And we all know the story, so we're not going to go through that. That the Egyptians pursue them and they run after them. And God is telling more. Well, that's why. Again, as much as I like the Ten Commandments movie, you watch the crossing of the Red Sea. Probably is the most ridiculous, but also the best scene of crossing of the Red Sea.
But how could they drown in the Sea of Reeds? I mean, it's much.
Remember, they are riding chariots.
Oh, so
they're riding chariots, and each chariot weighs at least 400 pounds, maybe more than that, with the horses. So what is happening then? There are places that those chariots will go down, and again, God is causing the waves to swept over them. So what is happening there? And so it says here that the Egyptians pursued and went into the midst of the sea, verse 23, and Pharaoh's horses, and verse 24, and in the morning watched the Lord in the pillar of fire and of clouds. No, here we go. And then verse 26, the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand upon the chariot." So Moses stretched out forth his hand, and the Egyptian in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and horsemen and all the hosts. So Pharaoh has followed them. But the sons of Israel walked on dry land through the sea. So again, they were riding those chariots and they got stuck in the mud. And then water came in. So did they all die? Maybe. No. We don't know. But again, they certainly lost. Again, the chariots. Chariots were at that time what tanks are today. Heavy arms. So what is happening there? If they overtook the Israelites, they would just ride through them. They would kill them all. But also, the weapons became this, let's say, the means of their destructions, because they got into the swamps and they just went down.
Just like Ukraine.
Yeah, more or less. Here we go. That's what they do over there. Yeah. It's always, again, if you trust too much in your military power, you might be surprised, because nature is going to work against you. Okay. So the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians.
I hate
Alarms.
Bible study's not over yet, though.
What is happening there? Verse
There's a kidnapped child in Clay County.
Verse 31, and Israel saw the great work which the Lord did against the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and his servant Moses. So here we can also translate it, believed in the Lord, or they trusted the Lord. And they see what's happening, they see that they were spared, that they were saved, so they all of a sudden, yes, God is God, God is great. It's not going to last long. But for now, they're good on that. So now we have this song of Moses and Miriam. It's a beautiful song. We're not going to read through it, but it's again, basically you have to know, this part, this song of Moses and Miriam, is the oldest text in the Bible. Because the people who study languages and all that, and they look at the structure of the language and the language itself of this part, and it's the oldest Hebrew that is in the Bible. So this is the oldest part of the Hebrew, and it's a poem. That's why it's also, but it's the oldest piece of the Bible that we have. Okay. So first they talk about God's triumph, what God did for them. Then verse 1 to 10 is again the triumph of God. They describe, the song describes the triumph of God, the thanksgiving. And then we see verse 11 to 13. They talk about only God. God is the highest of gods. Who is like you? Who is like you? You stretch out your hands. You have led your people, and so on. And then verse 14 to 16, it's how much that what God did had an effect on people. What we say, the peoples have heard and trembled. Pangs have seized them, the inhabitants of Philistia, and so on and so forth. And then verse 17 to 18, and now the future. It talks about future. You will bring them and plant them on your own mountain, the place, O Lord, which you have made for your abode, the sanctuary, Lord, which your hands have established. Again, this is redemption culminates in establishment of the temple. You're going to bring people to the holy mountain, the Zion, holy mountain. Okay? So this is the whole hymn. You can read it yourself, and then we go to crisis now. Here we go. So what's happened there? Verse 22. Then Moses led Israel onward from the Red Sea or Sea of Reeds, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. So guess what's going to happen? When they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. So what's happened there? I love this word, they murmured against. See, nobody spoke up openly. But it's a perfect description of what we do when we complain. We not go and face, let's say, the problem. We want to murmur, right? But just picture that, how we function. How we're not far removed from that. Again, we have to remember that when we drove through that part of the Sinai Peninsula from Suez Canal, when you drive from Suez Canal to Sinai, it's nothing. It's sand and rocks. There's nothing there. So when you walk for 3 days, you kind of get thirsty because how much water can you carry, right? So they have reason to complain. It's not that they don't have reason to complain. I would say the best thing is, we were on the bus, air-conditioned bus, driving for 8 hours. That was 8 hours drive from Cairo to Sinai. And after like 3 hours, we already start complaining. How are we there yet, right? Why it's so long and all that. And we had water and we were air-conditioning bus and so on. So imagine walking there. But I think that's kind of, for me, that was perfect. When we started talking, it was like, oh, it's such a long ride and all that. So, hey, imagine walking there. Yeah, but it's the whole idea that, again, they have reason to complain. The only problem is, in their complaining, they don't trust. Okay? So again, the sweet water. Actually, we did make to that oasis because it's a little out of the way. And next time, because it will take like extra half an hour to get to that oasis when there was the source of Moses and the well of Moses there. Maybe next time. So then the Lord made them a statute and an ordinance, so commandments that God gives them. And there he tested them, saying, if you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord, your God, and to what is right in his eyes, and give heed to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the disease upon you on which I put upon the Egyptian, for I am the Lord, your healer. So God is putting them to the test. And we will see 3 tests here. Usually, some of the headings, like in this Bible, we have that it's Israelites complain and crisis in the desert. It's God putting them to the test. Why is God putting them to the test? Because again, the faith that is based on miracles doesn't last long. If all you seek in your faith is the extraordinary, visions, miracles, things like that, you have very little faith, and you're not going to last through the difficult times. So here it is, they need to trust God in the mundane, daily struggle in the desert. That's why first is lack of water. They thirst. So rather than murmuring, they should come to Moses and ask him. That's why God is saying, why are you talking to me? They should know whom to talk to. And then we get chapter 16, which is only 6 weeks after the Exodus. Okay, because when you look at book of Numbers, it tells us exactly that it took them 6 weeks once they crossed the Red Desert to start complaining about the lack of meat. So what's happening there? So they are in the wilderness of Sin between Elim and Sinai on the 15th day of 2nd month after they led out Egypt, and the whole congregation of the son of Israel again murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness and said to them, would that we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us here into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. See, slave mentality. We would rather die of old age in Egypt than free here from starvation. And that's human nature. I remember that, best example, Poland. I left the country 1991, right after fall of the communism and so on. Came back, I was coming back several times, but like 10 years after that, around 2000, I was there for longer, for over a month. And talking to people whom I grew up with, or older people. And what I saw there was nostalgia for communism. They miss the communism. I said, we would rather have, because what was the communism? Everybody was poor and miserable, okay? But everybody was equal. Everybody was the same, poor, unless you were a party member and things like that. That's a different story. But everybody was in the same situation. All of a sudden, and always when I grew up, they said, "Oh, if we only had, we could buy stuff and so on. Even we could not afford it, but at least that would be freedom. We have choice." All of a sudden, 10 years later, they have everything. But they long for the days when they were taken care of. Because there was no such a thing, in communists, everybody had work. No, there was no such a thing like someone who did not have work. Because, the work of one person was done by 20. But everybody was working. I work in the office, I work on the construction company when I was in Poland. And it always was, the job that could be done by one person or two was done by 15, 20 people. Well, that's why the system was the way it was. But we see the same thing here. But people were longing for that because it's hard to struggle and try to find a job when you have no qualifications or when you have to change. People don't like change. So they said, when the communists ruled the country, then things were better because it's like, no, it wasn't better. That's why after first 3 elections, Wałęsa, who was the opposition, was elected. He was president for 2 terms. Whom they elected right after that? A former communist. And they were in love with him because he promised them what the communists did. So that was a struggle, but that's a human mentality. That's mentality of the slaves. We would rather be taken care of and poor, but live life till we die, rather than struggle in freedom and struggle, as free people, and make decisions and also carry the consequences of our decisions.
I think the whole thing is being taken care of. The same things you're talking about, the slave mentality,
Yeah.
the communist, same thing. I don't need to make choices. I'm being told which way to go, what road to take, when to wake up.
Yeah.
Sort of like people that go into prison, you see them, they function beautifully in prison. When they get out of society, they can't function.
Yeah.
When to wake up,
So it's the same, yeah.
eat, eat.
We get used to being taken care of, and people told us what to do, and that's what's happening. So they murmured, and they said they would rather die. But then the Lord said to Moses, kind of interesting, God is not angry with them. What time? 32? Oh. Okay. So verse 6.
Finish.
Finish it.
How much we have?
Yeah.
How much time do we have?
No, it's 8:30, but it doesn't
8:30?
matter. Finish.
Okay, let me just finish
You're
this
excited
part.
about finishing. I don't want to, cut
Okay.
your-
There's one thing here. God is not angry with the people. What he says, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them. We're going to go back to that test next week, because it's very important to look at the manna and there's two trials. But again, this whole idea of God understands his people.
So we left at 16.
Yeah, because later on, when they will complain and so on, God will get angry with them. Moses will have to defend people from God, because God said, "Why are they complaining? They see all the things I taking care of them. They still complain. I'm going to wipe them away." Moses will have to do the job to defend the people. But here, God understands his people, and God does things in order to, let's say, build up their trust in him.